Hi everyone, this is Daniel from Uncharted Ways, and today we're making a well and a tent. As always, the first thing that I like to do is the design. It's not just about having some measures written down, it's about figuring out the concept before moving on. For example, I chose not to put a wooden roof over the well, or to simulate any wood structure, because being in a very arid area, it would feel a bit out of place. I know that this is obvious, but the more details I imagine I put down, the more I realize what fits for me. We're gonna start with the well. For doing the circular shape of the well, I'm just carving it out of XPS foam. I honestly was going to do it out of cardbox and clay, but foam is just so much easier and rewarding. I'm using the cap of a bottle to have a circular shape, but of course, this is one of those times that if you kept your compass from high school, go grab it. This totally justifies being in your drawer for 10 plus years. For the stones on top of the well, you can carve another out of foam, but remember that because we are gonna cut it in small pieces and separate them a bit, the diameter is going to be slightly bigger, giving the impression that the stone ring on top of the well stands out a bit from its structure. While white glue is doing its work, I switched to the pillars next to the well. This cannot be any more straightforward. Cut them of the size that you want and make sure that their size makes sense next to the well. XPS foam is very easy to work with, so regardless of the type of columns or shapes that you want to make, a pencil or a hobby knife will allow you to carve those shapes by gently pressing the foam. In this case, we want to simulate bricks because it fits better the diorama, but a wooden structure can be as easily made. The next thing that we're gonna do is to apply gesso on the columns. Why are we doing this? The effect that we want to simulate could be summarized in one word: forgotten. This is a very old well, built no one remembers when, in an area where almost no one will wander. As I said, forgotten. So how do we insert that vibe into the terrain? We use the gesso to simulate the lining of the columns because of the effect that it makes next to the areas where it faded, showing the bricks below. Then we're gonna base coat the bricks with a vibrant red, not caring too much of going over the gesso as we will give it another layer when this is done. Black on the stone ring on top of the well, and then we're gonna apply a very light black wash so the paint gets to the recesses. Guys, we need to stop for a second. I'm sorry, but I forgot to introduce you to yet one of our most important tools in this channel. The aluminium foil ball. Yes, this might come as a surprise, but I'm not joking. One of the handiest and expensive tools that we can use for giving texture to rocks is a ball of aluminium foil. Just check how it looks already, and for those of you running low on faith, wait for when we highlight it. I realized the top of the columns didn't look as broken, so I went on with the help of a hobby knife and I carved some bricks out, taking care of not overdoing it. And yes, I repeated the base coat and wash process on those areas later on. Before moving on to the highlighting, we're gonna do yet another layer of gesso to cover some of those mistakes. For the final touches, I applied a very thin down ochre wash because I don't want the bricks to be of such a vibrant red, and once it was dry, I moved on to the highlighting. I was a bit hesitant on how to make the bricks look old and dusty, but without being too dull. So I decided to use one of my favorite colors for highlights, Vallejo Ice Yellow. I went very lightly over both the bricks and the white lining, and you can judge the outcome. This color never disappoints me. Time for the... wait, how's it called? Let me check. After completing a degree in wells, I decided to go for a pulley system because it sounds pro enough. Alright, so in order to do the pulley system, we're gonna cut a stick that already has a circular shape. And with the help of a drill, we're gonna make very narrow holes for inserting the wire. Use super glue, otherwise this could take forever. If you like to hold things as much as I do while they dry, use gum or anything at your disposal so you can go on with your life. Once the wire was dry, I primed the wooden part with a thin down black and then put a layer of watered down brown to give it fast some texture. We need a bucket and to put the rope around the pulley system. So because the rope is very simple, let me just show you quickly the bucket. We're making the shape that we want out of XPS foam and then carving a hole in the center with the help of my hot wire cutter. Then I'm putting some cardbox around to simulate the wood planks and some more cardbox for the metallic rings of the bucket. And that should be it. Now it's just a matter of painting it. I didn't like the handle of the pulley system, so I changed it for a wooden one, using some milliput and sticks. For those of you that don't know, milliput is an epoxy, so it's made out of two components that react together for making a hard structure. But this type is not liquid, but similar in its consistency to clay, allowing you to shape it however you want. Or in my case, however I can. I hope you like how it looks. The well is done, and I like how it looks. I think we managed to give it a nice desertic vibe. So we need to get hands-on with the tent or haima, however you prefer. The first thing that we need to do is making the structure. So with the help of our friend the popsicle and some hot glue, we're gonna set the foundations that we need for the cloth. Hot glue is fast, but anyway, give it a couple of minutes to be 100% sure it's solid. Okay, so now that the hot glue is dry, what we are going to do is to use some inexpensive materials like napkins to cover the structure of the tent. In order to do that, what we're going to do is to use some white glue. In this case, I'm going to use Mod Podge, but honestly, use any white glue. And what we're going to do is to put the mix of 50-50 Mod Podge water in the plate, and while it's still wet, we're gonna cover the structure and we're gonna let it dry. If you don't have a spare plate or you don't like the taste of white glue in your spaghetti, try to find a surface where you can easily lay your napkin. You don't need a lot of Mod Podge, just put a bit and start adding water and stirring until it's fully mixed. Grab the tissue by the corners and submerge it fully in the mix. I warned you already that the paper does not like to remain extended, but rather tries to go over itself again and again, leaking white glue on your hands in the process. It's okay, it can be extended again, it's just that while you extend one corner, the opposite will try to go over itself. So harness some patience before doing this. By the way, if you thought you could outsmart white glue, you're wrong. Don't leave the napkin on the plate. It sounds like a good idea because you don't risk the napkin going over itself, but not so fast. If you do that, the napkin will take revenge upon you and won't retract towards one angle, but rather everywhere. And before you know it, your napkin will look like a dry grape. And that will be much more complicated to smooth later on. The wet napkin is not extremely delicate, but because our sticks have a sharp end, if you pull from one side, well, you might end up breaking the wet tissue. After you have put it over your structure, I recommend you to go adjusting every corner little by little, leaving the fold on the corners and in the center to simulate later on the entrance for the tent. 2 napkins on top of each other is the correct amount, I think. You can wait for the first napkin to dry a bit, as it makes it easier with the second, but it's not necessary and I didn't do it. Just a small bit of advice about the drying process. Your napkin will leak, so be careful where do you put it. And second, if the edges get dry over something, well, remember that it's white glue what we put. So please change the position of the tent a couple of times before it fully dries on your table. Okay guys, so the napkin is dry, and as you can see, it's completely solid, it's hard already, and it has more or less the shape that we want. But anyway, I did a few more tries with different shapes and so on to see whether it would be better one type or another. This one, for instance, is with just one napkin, which I think is not good, it's too translucent. So what we're going to do with our final tent is we're going to cut here to simulate the entrance of the tent. We are going to cut these edges and we are going to paint it. I'm going to use an airbrush to paint because it will really simplify the process, allowing me to make smooth transitions effortlessly. I'm gonna prime it with a leather brown, and then a tan earth and a tan yellow will work for the gradients. While for base coating we want to cover the whole tent, for giving the lights we want to use every time a more perpendicular angle, because this way we will be leaving with a darker brown those areas that would be more hidden from direct light. I will use my ice yellow to give the biggest highlight, but just on the edges. And that's it. Our well and tent are ready, and we just need to place them somewhere they fit. Yeah, exactly. This is already better than plain EPS foam. But wait, go back. That's next week's diorama. If you don't want to miss where we're putting this tent and well, make sure you click that subscribe button. I'll show you next Thursday. That's all for today, but remember, it wasn't just a napkin, it was also a tent.